Proportional Response. Book 1. Chapter 10, Part 4. Bully Pulpit. Kilintar stood at the pulpit and stared down the assembled ambassadors of the League, waiting to see who would be first to speak. Ambassador Balund Komzor of the Arabso obliged him.
This is unconscionable. I have read the contract that the Kothro presented for the cessation of operations, and it is nothing short of grand theft. The humans invested phenomenal sums on that project, and they are expected to just leave everything behind. When there is nothing in that supposed contract, really more a document of intent to blackmail, to prevent the Kothro from starting up operations when they so desire. Oh no, you don't, Runda. I am still speaking. I read the document, and the statements of assurance that the Kothro won't start operations again when they find it convenient are all couched in phrases about the Kothro's sole discretion, and whether your people believe the humans will bend to your will and lick both your hooves and exultant talons. This will not stand, I say. To attempt to sanction humanity for refusing to allow grand larceny against some of their finest mining institutions is...
Kilintar leaned forward to speak.
Not the purpose of this censure, nor these reparations. I will allow that the Kothro could have handled their objections better, and an argument could be made that they should have come before the council with their grievance. I will even be willing to take some blame on that part, for I did advise them to try to settle the matter themselves. If I, or the Honourable Kothro, had suspected that the humans would take such unilateral, violent, immediate response, I would have advised differently, and I am sure they would have behaved differently. Let this be a lesson for us all in how to deal with the humans.
Well, shit. So that's what this is really all about. Now, anyone who wants to deal with humanity will be expected to go through the council, which means going through the Azultan. Not that Henry's public allies will, but this is going to make the ruse much harder. I'm glad we established that hard line already. Ambassador Balud was not to be dissuaded so easily, however. He held up a sheaf of papers, presumably a copy of the contract the Kothro tried to get Henry to sign.
Oh yes, the magnanimity of the righteous Galtons. The humans responded here with great restraint and discipline, said I. In fact, I believe it is the Kothro who should be censured. If any of the rest of us came before the council with this kind of mud-stained garbage.
The Arabeso dramatically flung the pages out into the open spaces of the chamber.
Against any of us other than humanity, the best they could hope for would be to be laughed out of these chambers. Further, if they tried this sort of straight-up extortion in a private room, they would be the ones facing censure. That the humans responded to this sort of provocation is hardly a surprise, nor something for which they should be challenged.
The Findle ambassador shot to her feet.
The actions taken in that room are not material to the matter at hand. Their rules, procedures, and...
Ingeborg tuned her out. He had learned a lot from the humans and the trials of the last few months, and he could tell you who was going to interrupt who at this point, and what their salient points would be. The others were obviously moving forward with the plan, despite Henry attempting to abort. I can't just leave them hanging. I'm sorry, Henry, I will have to go on as planned. He gave half an ear to the shouting back and forth, and waited for the right moment to intervene. He looked down at Henry, but the man set his gaze on the Prime Minister and refused to look away. He wanted to stop this, and was going to accept those sanctions. Why? He picked at the puzzle while the ambassadors railed at each other. That the humans had more supporters than detractors was abundantly clear, but many of those supporters were obviously sympathetic to the Kothro as well. Finally, the arguments started to repeat themselves. Henry won't signal, he won't even look at his console. I know that both Ballard and Galen have tried to send him messages, but his silence hasn't caused them to drop the script. Nothing to do but play my part, I guess. I just wish I knew what he wanted me to do. Enibal cleared his throat and gestured for attention, interrupting the Rooks's interruption of the Thermicon. Ambassador Onsar turned to him with narrowed eyes, then stopped speaking. His whiskers twitched, but then he gave a fractional nod of his head. Enbiel suppressed a smile. Maybe I am not as bad at this as I feared. Few in this council could get the floor so easily at a time like this.
My fellow ambassadors, it is clear that this is a complex and layered issue, which has unfortunate possible consequences for all of us if any action we take were to be made too heavily binding. It is equally obvious that both parties in this dispute acted hastily and regrettably. I know that many of us have entered into deals with the humans which we have regretted at one point or another. Of course, sometimes we have regretted deals with each other as well, but we all know it is an entirely different matter when dealing with someone so frightening as they are. Therefore, I can say that I have a certain sympathy for the Cothro. Indeed, I will admit that there were moments I feared for my own life yesterday. We must not let our feelings about humanity cloud our judgment, however, and we must remember one important and salient fact in all of this unfortunate affair. No one was actually injured outside of treatable mental stress put on the unfortunate Cothro miners. But I agree that we cannot allow any League race to simply deploy troops against civilian targets any time a negotiation is unfavorable to them. At the same time, it would set a dangerous precedent to allow the Cothro to make such a far-reaching set of demands at such a late stage in this sort of cooperation and expect to be able to keep everything that was invested by their partners. Consider, my fellow ambassadors, how you and your governments might react in such a situation. While I will allow that humanity's behavior was excessive, consider the provocation. No, my friends, there is blame to go around here, and I contend that, if action is to be taken, it should be balanced against all of the facts. No one can be held entirely blameless in this case, including myself. In hindsight, I should have counseled Ambassador Comzor to bring his proposal before the council and refuse to have any part in the sordid affair. Alas, I did not, and therefore I must accept some of the responsibility for what has occurred. Therefore, I will make a counter-proposal as follows. Humanity will be issued a public notice of censure for use of force without formal declarations nor consulting the council. The Cothro will receive and acknowledge a formal censure for attempting to make hostile changes to a contract without proper consultation of the League Council. Humanity will be assessed a penalty in the amount of the projected therapy for all Cothro who were on the site at the time of the altercation. The Cothro will take the funds provided and place them in an irrevocable trust, which will be for the exclusive use of said therapy. Any funds remaining in the trust when the last of those miners die will be donated to a children's charity. Upon receipt of the funds, the Cothro will formally acknowledge that the humans have made reparations and that no further action on this matter will be pursued. Do I have a second to this motion?
Kilintar growled and leaned in to speak, but the Ruxa ambassador beat him to it.
The Kismar nation will second the motion. Do we have a third?
Enable watched Galen and Balud compete to hit their buzzers first. The Themiakin won.
The Shreen Republic thirds the motion. Prime Minister, we formally call for a vote on this proposal.
Kilintar lifted the corners of his lips in a sneer, then looked across the gathered ambassadors before he spoke.
We will take no vote at this time. This matter is obviously contentious, and we do not want to rush to a resolution based on words spoken on the council floor. Ambassador NBL Vecna, you will consult with the council legal office and draft a proper legal proposal with the points you have outlined. I will make a recording of our good ambassador's stirring speech available to all, so that they can check the legal document against the words which were just spouted off, and you all were so anxious to agree to. In order to give the Venter ambassador time to gather his documents and allow all of you to properly consider the matter, this council is adjourned.
Kilintar killed the audio system and forced the doors to all of the booths open. He then turned and left without any of his usual posturing. Enibal stood in shock. I won? Just like that? The proposal will pass just as I stated it. He knows that, and the reparations the humans pay will hardly be more than a rounding error against the loss of all that equipment. Why did he give in so easy? He glanced around the chambers and felt a sense of foreboding when his eyes passed Jalat. Why does she look so pleased? Even worse, why does Henry not look pleased? This turned out far better than we expected. Some hours later, Enibal activated the anti-spying device that his people had been able to print from their own materials printers. It had been tricky, and only 2 of the 10 they tried to produce had function, but the plans provided by the humans had worked in the end. He plugged his laptop, his this time, not the special one from Her Majesty, into the special port installed by the humans' little robots after they burrowed between the embassies, through the foundation and up the inside of his wall. What will the humans think of next? Strike that question, Our Lady of Grace. I am not sure I want to know. He connected the line and Henry's face appeared instantly on the screen. The man had odd dark spots under his eyes and a concerned look on his face. but he still managed a bright smile.
It is good to see you, Henry. I am sorry I didn't follow the abort signal, but it seems that the other two missed it, and I didn't want to leave them hanging in the air like that.
Henry nodded.
Given the circumstances, you could hardly have done anything else. I am a little annoyed at the other two. They saw my signal, but choose not to abort. One got his signals mixed up, the other just wasn't willing to back down from the fight.
Hannibal shook his head.
I don't understand why you wanted to abort, though, and especially don't understand why you seemed displeased that we didn't. It all turned out well.
Henry shook his head.
Yes, it turned out well, so there is that. However, the penalties that they were trying to impose were a fraction of what I expected them to be when we proposed the plan. Really, I was expecting the multiplier to be times 100, not double, and for them to try to impose trade sanctions on top of it. As it stood, we could have fought some of those penalties in the courts and weaseled out of most of the rest, or pushed it off until after all of this is over.
Hannibal nearly choked on his own tongue. They expect this to be over that soon? He would not have been able to push those payments off more than a few years. Henry nodded at his distress and answered as though he'd read his mind.
Yes, this will be over that soon, one way or another, which is another reason I wanted all of you to abort. This entire move is a change of tactics by the Zoltan, which means that Kilintar is no longer in charge. Surely you noticed his behavior when he walked in today.
He nodded to Henry.
Yes, I wanted to discuss that with you as well. I do not think he is in charge anymore, and that he is deeply angered by it. Furthermore, I think it is Jalat who is now calling the shots based on the way he looked at her. This agrees with our assessment, and is not ideal. Kilintar is a brute force bully. He will come at you head on and pound on you until his fist is tired, or he beats you into submission, or both if he wants to make an example. If he has to give up, he will back off and find another way to pound on you, which he thinks will be effective. Jalat is more subtle and more dangerous. She likes to work at a distance, pulling strings and making others do her dirty work for her. This tactical change also means that the Exaltan are getting impatient, and we expect them to move to an endgame soon, one way or another. We suspect that they have begun to realize how quickly we are gaining strength. They are trying to cut us off from the rest of the League, erode our support, and try to make as many of the neutral parties as possible sit out the war. Yes, Senor, war. It is inevitable now. Our worst-case estimates have the Adultans starting the shooting in as little as 6 months. Our best case gives us as much as a couple of years. You and I will need to have a lot of discussions about the plan, and which aspects we will need to bring into play.